So hello folks, welcome to my greenhouse in the beginning of March to talk about all of the seeds that we can be sown, because March is crazy. The jump from February to March is absolutely mad in the amount of seeds you'll see that can be sown. As always, bit of a caveat with this stuff is just be aware of your last frost date, because mine isn't until kind of late May, so I really can't be planting a lot of things out in the garden. Therefore, I don't sow a lot of the seeds that say they can be sown in March, because I don't want them to be little plants before it's time for them to go outside. So just have a think about your situation. However, on that one, I have been sowing loads of seeds since January. As you can see, my greenhouse is looking really green and full. In fact, I sowed quite a lot of stuff right through the winter, and it's been great. And the reason I can do that is because everything that you see is what's called a cold crop, okay? And that's the big difference. Behind me, you'll see there's a big Vitapod heated propagator. That's where my hot crops go. Okay, so let's start with the hot crops then. My hot crops I started back in January with King of the North bell peppers. They are so reliable and awesome and stunning. I get massive harvests of beautiful red ripe peppers from these guys. I can rely on them heaps. So that's what I've got going again this year. Now, I was able to sow these back in January, like a lot of people do with peppers, because I could give them that warm start they needed to germinate the seeds and keep them nice and warm with the light they need as well, because I've got the ability to do that. So it may be with you, maybe you would do that indoors. You put them on a sunny windowsill indoors. With me, I've got them in this Vitapod heated propagator, and you see them all in here. In fact, will I get you some? So I've got them in here in my Vitapod heated propagator, okay? So it's keeping them all nice and warm, and crucially, there are lights that I can set so that they're getting 10, 12, 14, whatever hours light a day that they need, because up until now, it's been pretty dismal and dark here, and there's not a lot of light. It's starting to change now, we're into March though. So that's why I was able to get these going early. The other crop I started in January was my aubergines. These are Black Beauty. Now, this is my first year getting this success with aubergines. Although, let me explain that. I tried aubergines way back when I was a beginner gardener and didn't have a clue what I was doing and had no success. I'm hoping this year is going to be different. But again, like peppers and tomatoes, aubergine are a warm crop. Okay, they have quite a long growing season because they need that heat and sun to develop, mature and to ripen the fruits. So that's why we've got them going early, to give them that little bit extra time. Okay, and the last hot crop I've got going is tomatoes. Now, this is what I'm going to come back to at the end of the video, okay? Because the thing with tomatoes, they grow very, very quickly. Much quicker than peppers or aubergines do. So if you wanted to sow these early, you need to make sure that you can keep these plants, when they're huge big plants, somewhere warm. So if you're growing these on your windowsill, you may find come this time of year they're getting quite big and unmanageable. And unfortunately, if you live anything like my climate, you can't be putting these out in an unheated greenhouse yet. But not all is lost. I'm going to talk about what you can do with these at the end of the video. So that's my hot crops. I got these all going in January, and tomatoes I got going in February. I'm going to be sowing more this month, and that's where the difference comes in. So we're going to leave hot crops for just now, and we're going to move on to what I was calling cold crops. So the thing with cold crops then, okay, it doesn't mean they need cold, although most of them don't like it to be overly warm, but it is the kind of things that I have been sowing in an unheated greenhouse and bringing them on in the hope that I'll be able to get an earlier harvest of things when it is nice weather out there. Now, the thing with that is, all of these plants will grow much, much slower when it's colder. So the things that you are sowing in January, February and early March will take longer to germinate and slightly longer to grow than they will the ones that you sow maybe in April, May, June. Okay, so these are things you have to factor in. But I have already been sowing, and all of the seeds I've been sowing you can sow in March and more. Now, if you want lots more details, I'll put a link in the description of the video to a page on my website that has all of the details of all of the seeds I've grown so far and where you can get them. Okay, so that's there if you want it, and I'll add everything I talk about today. Okay, but let's talk about it then. So I'm doing something called succession planting, which means I don't grow heaps of any one thing. Instead, I grow small amounts of everything, and I do it often. So as a classic example, now I've just watered these, so they're probably going to drip everywhere. These are some of my spring onions. Because I've got them going at different stages. So I've actually got some that are outside in the garden. These are white Lisbon. They're a winter variety of spring onion, so they do okay with the cold as long as you give them a little bit of protection against the frosts and the freezes. Hence why I'm able to get some out in the garden just now. And it's dripping. I came in and they were all wilted, so I've just watered them. Now, I'm not going to keep growing that same variety because those are particularly for the colder months to get things going. I've also got Ishikuru going, which was a recommendation from my mate Steve, who's over at Green Side Up. Those same idea, spring onions, he found that he got bigger, better plants from the Ishikuru. They were proper big, sort of thick stemmed plants. So I'm giving them a try. Fingers crossed we'll see how they go, but bring you along and tell you about it. I've also got, as you can see, a lot of these mustard greens. I've got them on both sides of the greenhouse. I'm going to be putting some of them out in the garden. Now that they're nice, big, healthy plants, again, I'll put them out under some cloches, give them a bit of protection and see how they go. It's a bit of an experiment. So I've got green wave mustard, which is this nice plain frilly green leaf. But I've also got, if I've got any here, I can show you. Where are my dragons? They're there. I've also got some dragon's tongue mustard. Now these are very similar until you get up close and look, and these have purples and reds on the leaves, and as the plant matures there'll be more and more of that colouring on the leaves. So I'm quite excited. Slightly different flavours. The green wave we've found is a bit of a spicier mustard leaf. When they're big, both plants, when they're large, you can be putting them into stir fries and things and cooking them like you do spinach. But when they're nice and small and tender, we're putting them into salads, along with beetroot leaves. So I've been sowing beetroot since January. This little lot here is just for the leaves, but I've also got beetroot sown for actual beetroots. Now let me talk about that because it is really interesting. What I have done for years, I've been getting lots of questions about this. So basically what I'm doing then, and I've been doing this since the start of last month, is I've got beetroot and carrots sown into root trainer module trays, the very, very deep module trays, okay? I've been doing this for years, and I do it that way, and then I transplant them out into the garden in the warmer months. I can do this because they're in the big deep root trainers, and I can transplant them without disturbing the plants at all, and that's why it's working for me. Neither of these particularly like to be disrupted when you transplant, especially carrots, which is why you'll see a lot of advice saying to sow carrots direct because they don't like being transplanted. That is very true, but if you're incredibly careful, it can be done. However, now that we're coming into March, things like beetroot and carrots can be sown directly out into the garden. They will do well that way, and I'm going to be doing that as well because I mentioned succession sowing. Well, things grow at a different pace, so that means I'll be able to get carrots and beetroot that have come on in the greenhouse out into the garden, and they will mature faster than the little seeds that I'm sowing, so I'll get harvest after harvest. The idea being when one harvest is all come out and it's gone, the next lot are ready to come out soon after. That's the idea. Okay, now varieties wise, my favourite, and I've told you guys about these before, is the purple haze carrot. It's purple on the outside and orange on the inside. I've had so much success with those carrots, but I love them for salads and things, for using when you're not cooking with them, because you can cut them into ribbons with a potato peeler or veg peeler, and you get that two-tone of colour. I've also got an F1 variety of carrots, a hybrid carrot that is resistant to carrot fly. So I've got them getting direct sown into the beds, and I've got Amsterdam forcing, which is another orange carrot, but it's a nice long thick carrot you get. They do tend to be quite straight, quite good carrots. So and they're great for sowing early in the year, so I'm getting them out direct sown as well. So that's the carrot and the beetroot. I've spoke about the mustard. Some more greens. I've got trays here. There's not really much for you to see yet, but this is cut and come again salad crops. If I bring it right in, there's not really much to see here, but I've got cut and come again crops. So that is your little salad leaves that you just cut straight into a salad, and you get 2 or 3 harvests per tray out of that. So I keep them going. But I've also got, this is lamb's lettuce or corn salad. These are little individual lettuces, okay? And I've got these going. These got sown in January, so this is them now. Again, it's an unheated greenhouse, so they're out here in the cold, hence why they've not done anything spectacular yet. But these will catch up very quickly now that it's warming up. And this month I'll be sowing another lot of these, again, for the succession sowing. On the same topic then of greens, I've also got some spinach going. So spinach you can be sown now. It is absolutely stunning. What I'm doing, however, is technically not a spinach. It's a chard, but I'm doing perpetual spinach, so that is one that you can be harvesting time and time again, and it's a perennial plant, so it'll keep giving me leaves. And again, you can harvest little leaves for putting in salads, or the nice big leaves if you're going to cook with it. We do a lot of cooking with our greens, so those are awesome for us. Other big ones for us have been pak choi, and I have had the greenhouse full of pak choi right through the winter. It does fantastic in these colder months, so I'm going to be sowing some more of that this month, both red pak choi and green pak choi. Fantastic. And as you can see, I've got my standard lettuce variety. So these are my little gem lettuces. These ones are specifically a winter variety. These are winter gems. I've also got other sort of gem style lettuces I'm going to be planting. So I've got little gem, which is this sort of idea, but a nice little compact lettuce. And again, I'll be getting them sown this month. So it's all exciting on the lettuce front. A little word on that one. Your greens, your lettuces, your pak choys, those types of plants, those prefer the cooler months, so the start of the year and the end of the year. They don't do so well when it gets properly hot. They tend to bolt. So these are great to get started early and get cropping from them early spring, very early into summer. And then again, after midsummer, you can get these planted out again, and there's less risk of bolting that way. And that's what I tend to do with things. But another one, which is stunning, is peas. Now, I have got these trays for pea shoots in here in the greenhouse. And as you can see, I've been harvesting and eating these already. However, I've got 2 pea plants outside that have been out since, I think, September last year. They have been out there all winter and they are surviving stunningly. I did it as an experiment because someone said you could be sowing peas outside and they'd be fine, and I didn't believe them. Turns out they were right. So 2 varieties then. Meteor, I am absolutely loving, and it's Meteor that I've got going in here for my pea shoots. But I've also got Kelvedon Wonder, are the ones that are out in the garden. And I got such amazing crops from the Kelvedon Wonder last year in the garden. So they're a firm favourite of ours. Oh, now this isn't one that I'm sowing, but it's interesting for you guys that are into your herbs. This is French tarragon. Now, you will be hard pushed to find French tarragon seeds. They are incredibly rare because the plant really does not flower and put out seeds. You tend to grow these from cuttings. So this plant, I have now had this plant for 10 years. And every year I break it up and divide it into smaller plants, and I give plants away and I start with a small plant again. And as you can see, it's early March and here we go, the tarragon's back. So if you want your herbs for your greenhouse, Tarragon's a great one for this time of year. Dill as well, you can be sowing your dill seeds this time of year in an unheated greenhouse. Basil, however, basil's quite a delicate, tender little plant, so I find I have to wait until April before I can be sowing my basil. Okay, so that was a nice segue then. We've done our vegetables and our greens. I've done a little segue herbs. Now let's talk about flowers, because this is a big one I want you to think about. You're going to see so many flowers that say they can be sown in March. And it's quite true for most people. However, remember I mentioned the whole frost date thing? Well, my frost date is the 18th of May. So I don't want to be sowing too many flowers so that I have to put grown plants out into the garden when there's a risk of frost, because it will just kill them off. So I'm staggering the sowing of all of my flowers for the purpose of how much space I've got in the greenhouse, okay? But there are a lot you can sow if you have somewhere like a greenhouse where you can keep them until it's time for them to go out. And I've already got, these are my little snapdragons. Oh, it needs a water, it's very light. And you can see I sowed these last month, and that's them coming on now. So these will get pricked out and potted on soon. I've also got my dahlias. These are dahlias, Yankee Doodle Dandy. These are my favourite dahlias. And also, this is the very first flower I ever grew from seed. So it holds a bit of a special place for me. So I grow these guys. I have no luck keeping tubers alive, possibly because I'm too lazy to dig them up and I leave them in the garden. So every so often I just re-sow these guys from seed. But again, it's not too late to be sowing any of these guys now, not at all. Okay, so snapdragons or antirrhinum, dahlias, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and also foxgloves. Now, sowing foxgloves at this time of year, you can do it and get little plants going. However, you may not get flowers this year. It may be next year before you get flowers. So I'm giving it a try to see how I get on. And I've got those little seedlings, and I've also got some that got sown earlier and have come on a little bit more. Normally, I would be sowing foxgloves last year, back in September, and they would be much bigger by now, but didn't happen last year, so I'm trying to catch up. Now, there are actually some more flowers that I'm going to be sowing this month, and that's going to be my marigolds. I'm going to do more marigolds, because you can never have enough marigolds in terms of companion planting. And they are so reliable out in the garden, so they're going. I'm going to be sowing some rudbeckia. We had a few rudbeckia plants in the garden last year. They looked absolutely amazing. Big, we had the yellowy orange heads on them. Loved them so much, multi-headed plants, so there are going to be more of those going. And they give you flowers through the autumn months, so you're colouring your autumn months that way. Fantastic. Also cosmos, we're big fans of cosmos. So I said last month I was going to sow them. Didn't get round to it, but it is not too late. I'll get them sown this month. So that is a quick take around of the different veg, herbs and flower seeds that I'm going to be working with this month. No doubt there will be more, but those are the ones that are on my plan for just now. So we'll see if I change my mind and add to that plan. But I want to get back now to earlier on I mentioned hot crops, because this month, March, is quite an exciting one. A lot of people will sow their tomato seeds this month. The folk that don't have heated propagators or lights or space indoors for bringing on those plants. So this is something that I actually did for years. I've only been bringing tomatoes and peppers and things on early for the last couple of years, okay? Before then, I actually waited until the end of March before I sowed any of those seeds. And it works brilliantly. I always got good crops from all of my plants. Maybe not as amazing as I get now that I sow them early, but you know, it's not that far off. And you can do it in an unheated greenhouse, get them sown in here now, and get those little plants going. Now that's what I want to talk about. I mentioned how at the moment, if you've sown your tomatoes, your peppers, etc. early, they need to be kept warm. Okay, so even now that they are actual growing plants, they still need to be kept warm. So you can't put those plants out in an unheated greenhouse this month in an area like mine, okay? Those plants want it to be round about 15C consistently to get the very best out of them, and a minimum of 10C, and that's an absolute minimum. But those temperatures include overnight. So have a think, is your unheated greenhouse hitting those temperatures overnight? Because if it isn't, you don't want to be putting your tomatoes and peppers and things out there yet, okay? So instead, what I used to do was just sow my seeds this month, because the difference is, and I'm going to show you. So I showed you this nice little tomato plant earlier, okay? Because I've got different plants here, different varieties, and they were sown at different times. So this one was sown last month. This is a different variety, okay? This is a marmande, which is a beefsteak. It's a huge tomato that grows on this plant. And I have found this tends to be a much bigger plant that grows much taller, much straighter, much quicker. Now, this was only sown in January. And if this is the size it is now, what size is it going to be at the end of next month? And this is why I always say about being careful about what you're sowing and do you have space for them. The reason being, a little small seedling needs less than a big plant does. These plants are starting to really build themselves up. They may even be thinking about their first flowers, in which case they need a lot more nutrition than a little tiny seedling will. So that means if the temperatures aren't right, the plant won't be able to take up the nutrients it needs, and it will then start to stress, okay? So that's the difference between having a plant in an unheated greenhouse versus growing a little seedling, okay? That little seedling will be fine, sown this month, and it will grow, and by the time it's a nice big plant, it will be the right temperature for it in your greenhouse, okay? So don't worry, don't think you've missed the boat at all. You haven't. You can get sown your tomatoes, peppers, etc. towards the end of this month, and they'll be just grand, okay? So to give you an idea of that then, I actually discovered this problem last year because I put my plants out into the greenhouse in April last year, right at the start of April. And I can do that because I've got a heater. As you know, I've got power in my greenhouse, so I've got the option to use a heater if I wanted to. So what I was doing was I was heating the greenhouse to 10 degrees overnight so that I could have all the plants out in situ. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get the temperatures right, and my little tomato plants were really starting to suffer. Now, if you want to know more about that and the kind of stress it can cause, I did a video, so there'll be a link in the description, and I'll link to it at the end of this video as well, if you want to go and see what kind of stress it puts the plants under. It's well worth a watch, I would say, just for information purposes. But that leads me on nicely to another question you guys have been asking. As you can see, none of my plants are in propagators, and even the ones in the Vitapod, there is no lid on it, okay? That is because you really, really need your plants to be getting a lot of ventilation, okay? Two things. If you have a lot of water or a lot of moisture and poor ventilation, you're going to get moulds and fungus and things growing. And quite commonly what you'll see is a white fuzzy fungus on the surface of your seed trays. It can kill your plants, okay, so you want to be careful about this one. But it's caused because that's a nice, warm, humid environment, perfect environment for them to grow. And even just opening your vents isn't enough ventilation. So just be careful how much watering you're doing, because if your seed tray, your compost, etc. is over wet, it will encourage this fungus to grow. So might be an idea, if you can, like I do, I put propagator trays on all of these overnight while they're in my greenhouse, or I fleece them if it's going to be cold. But during the day, I take all those lids off so that everything can get a bit of air and a bit of a breeze going around in the greenhouse, just to try and keep ventilation as good as I can. Okay? And so don't forget, remember, subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, hit the thumbs up if this is the type of content you like, and please feel free to leave comments underneath the video. We all like a good chat there. So of course, I said there was going to be something a bit exciting and a bit different and a bit of an experiment that I'm doing this month, and it is this. So I said earlier on that I used to always sow my tomato seeds kind of mid to late March, and that was a standard for me. Well, I said last month that I was going to be sowing Ola Polka and drop cabbagin, and I'm so going to have got that wrong, which are little patio plants or patio bush tomatoes, basically incredibly small little bush tomatoes. Well, I've decided I'm going to have a bit of fun with this. I have always said that I can't grow tomatoes outside here in my garden because I just don't have a spot that is sheltered enough, gets enough sun, is warm enough, that kind of thing, for a plant to thrive and for that fruit to ripen to give me a decent harvest. Now that is because you need a certain amount of days of premium weather to get that plant from seed to ripe fruit to harvest. And I just don't get that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try these two little tiny patio plants outdoors with another two, and that is Real Seeds house tomatoes, a red cherry, and they're Lata, which is a very early ripening. Now, these two are from Real Seeds, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to get them now. They were given to me by my friend Danny, who has a channel over at the Grapevine Allotment, and he sent me some of these, so this is quite exciting. These two are on my list of seeds, so you can get these. So I was going to say, if any of you guys want to do a grow along with Eli on tomatoes outdoors, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be a great one for anyone who's in Scotland and has never tried to grow tomatoes outdoors before. But also, it'll be fun for folk elsewhere in the world, so we can all compare who gets the first tomatoes, how quickly do they ripen, what do they taste like, how many tomatoes do we get roughly as a harvest. So I'm actually going to be growing some of these over in Colourful Corner out in the garden, because that's a nice sunny spot, and we'll see how they take. I'm also going to be doing some in here in the greenhouse as well. So there'll be a full proper video about this, and you can join me and find out all about this at the end of the month, and you can grow along with Eli as our first exciting one for this year. That was interesting then. That's my very quick run through of my March plans for my seed sowing. There's going to be a lot more happening in the garden in March because this is when things get really exciting. But as I said, if you want to find out more about the tomatoes and the stress, video here. If you want to find out more about what's going to be going on, check out my plan video, because I actually tell you what I'm going to be growing and sowing and when in that one. See you guys!